on the vocal minority.
Are you part of the silent majority? Or are you part of the vocal minority?
Let's go. Attention, please.
If America can be saved, and I don't know if it's too late, but it'll be through radio shows like this new thing.
This shit here feels like a whole entire world collapse.
The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers.
It's the vocal minority.
The revolution will be live.
That crazy week hasn't been home.
Right, yeah, no doubt. I'm sure for you it's been really crazy. So our guest today is a longtime reporter with Dallas's WFAA-TV. She currently covers the Dallas Police Department and was on site when the tragic shooting happened in Dallas on Thursday. So let's welcome Rebecca Lopez to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Hey, no problem. I appreciate your time. I wish it was under better or happier circumstances, but I know you're busy, so really appreciate you coming on today.
Absolutely.
What's it been like for you? I know it's been a hectic last and tough couple of days for you. So I guess let's start there. How are you doing today, and what's it been like for you these past couple of days since Thursday evening?
It's been really difficult and heartbreaking. People always ask me, what is the most difficult thing you've ever covered? And I've covered a lot of tragedy. I was at Waco when the compound burned to the ground and covered the Branch Davidians. I was in right after the Murrah building. I watched it blew up, but I didn't watch it blow up. But right after that, I was there within a day or two after that, and they were still recovering people. So I've covered a lot of tragedy in my career, but this for me is the darkest time because I knew some of those officers. I have covered Dallas police for 13 years.
Oh, wow.
I know a lot of police officers, and so in my mind, as all of this was going on, and I'm trying to cover the story, I'm wondering, is it someone I know who is dead? Oh my gosh! And so all of that is filtering through me. And people say that when they watched me on the air the other night that I appeared emotional, but I was, because I truly have some very good friends on the Dallas Police Department that I love and respect, and so it's been difficult.
So I guess that's a question to get into as far as reporting. And as a reporter, I'm you want to be as objective as you can, and you probably want to keep emotion out of your reporting, probably. Or is that right? Is that a tenet of reporting, or your style of reporting, or?
Well, absolutely. We always try to maintain that objectivity, where we don't want nobody knows what your political leanings are and that kind of thing. But when it comes to something like this, that is this tragic, you're human. And,
right.
We have feelings. And so for me, I just reported what you saw, and what I'm reporting now is just raw. It's raw emotion for what has happened, and sadness, profound sadness, that we are here at this point in our country with so much anger and so much hate and so much violence. As much, it's hard to fathom, and sometimes it is difficult, to remain objective when it comes to something like this, because there's no reason why these officers' innocent lives should have been gunned down. There just isn't. There's no other way to cover this story but with profound sadness for me.
Sadness, and I'm sure frustration and anger. All those things that that you're probably feeling, that we're all feeling.
Yeah.
A peaceful event that ended in the most tragic of ways. So I guess how do you think our city is doing today? What do you think kind of the pulse of the city is? Like what's it like downtown? And how do you think Dallas itself is handling it?
I have been amazed at the outpouring of love that I have seen on social media, and officers that I know that are telling me, oh my gosh, this person did this for me. I do think that the city is coming together. I was also I really loved seeing the faith leaders come together, Bishop T.D. Jakes, Tony Evans, those types of leaders coming together, because honestly, right now, that is what we need.
Right.
We need prayer. We need healing. We need peace. And so to hear Bishop Jakes' comforting words for this community, for me, goes a long way towards that healing process of how do we move past the pain and the anger to a place of peace.
No, that's right, because it's we were already at a place of pain and anger. That's what prompted the protest.
Right.
And then to obviously there's no good word to put, but to compound that by the tragic and the murder of the officers is just, it's crazy. So I'm glad that that you see some recovery on the way, because certainly that the country needs it, our city needs it. So I mean, people know what happened, but there's a lot of stories. But you have I guess most times it would be the benefit of being so close to the action, because of your job. And if we can kind of start chronologically and start at the beginning of the protest, the setup. Dallas has a history of peaceful protests. We don't really have too many issues when it comes to civil disobedience, other than people blocking, I-35, right? We're pretty decent. The city and the leaders get along with the organizers, right? There's really no history of bad blood or any issues in previous protests, right?
Not in previous protests, but there has been a long, there has been a long history of division, of racial division in the city.
Right.
When it comes to police. I mean, back in the 1980s, there were 4 Dallas police officers that were gunned down. Also, in that year, that 1 year, it was the most violent year when it came to police officer deaths. And there was a lot of anger. And there was a big Back the Blue campaign back then. I was in college, so I remember seeing it. Vividly. I went to the University of North Texas, and so there has been this racial tension. And there's been, look, the Dallas Police Department has done an amazing job in recent years of training its police force, making sure that they have officers that have racial sensitivity training, how to de-escalate. They are one of the best trained forces when you come to that. But there was in the past a history of officers that overstepped their boundaries, and there were people that were hurt, there were people that were killed, and there was a lot of anger between members of the African American community and DPD. I mean, there have been a lot of protests, but there's never been anything like this. And look, those people that are people that are legitimate protesters that have a gripe with DPD, none of them condoned what happened. These were the actions of a crazy man.
Right.
But so it's not the people that have that are protesting that feel like there's been injustices committed across the nation at the hands of law enforcement. Those aren't the people that did this. It was a crazy person with guns. That's the bottom line.
Right. Yeah. And I want to get into him and kind of what we know about him here. Was it Micah Johnson, the shooter there? Can you set the scene and what happened from your vantage point on that evening?
Well, I actually was. I arrived right after the shooting, and when I got downtown, there were people everywhere screaming. There were people shouting, "There's a shooter! There's a shooter!" And so people were screaming and running for cover at the Omni Hotel. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm here all the time at the Omni.
Right.
And there were people and there were officers lined up in formation. They were with assault rifles, and they're moving through, trying to find where there possibly might be a sniper. And it was scary. There were scary moments. And so it was chaotic. I kept thinking, I'm in Dallas. This is my city. This is the city that I've lived in for almost 2 decades.
Right.
I went to college here, so I've spent most of my life here. So I couldn't believe what was happening. And at one point, officers are sweeping because they're looking for a shooter, and they don't know where the person is. There's still an active shooter out, and they look at me, and I was kind of crouched behind a pillar, but I had my cell phone out, and the officer sweeps around, and he sweeps his weapon in my direction, not to shoot me, but to see if I'm who I am. And I stick my hands up, and I'm like, I'm a reporter. It was scary. I mean, there's no way around it. It was a scary moment for those people that were down here.
And what kind of information were you getting? You said you got there right after the shooting happened. So what kind of information were you all getting, when it first happened?
Well, we knew that there were officers down. We knew there were officers dead. We had there were officers everywhere that were, I have a lot of sources, so I've got people that are texting me, and we're hearing there's officers down. The first thing that you heard on the scanners was there's a shooting, officer down, shots fired. So that's already stuff that we're hearing on the scanner. So we knew that there were officers that had been shot at that point. And then I initially didn't know the magnitude. I mean, by the time I got to the scene, I knew there were at least 3 officers that were dead. I did know that because of my sources. What I didn't realize was that there were all the other ones that had been shot, and then ultimately 5 that lost their lives.
Right.
That just kept filtering through the day or through the evening, and that was jarring and shocking in every aspect.
And I guess the mayor and the police chief and everyone's pretty confident that there was a solo shooter, that he acted alone, right? That there was, I know initially there was, thought that, they got to check everybody. And then you had the gentleman, was it Mark Hughes, who was, misidentified. But from all your sources, it was one person. He acted alone and just acted this out.
Right. They're still looking into all of that. One of the biggest questions is, how and where did he know to be? Before they have these protests, there are meetings where they outline the march, where they outline the way they're going to go, where they're going to go. Because DPD needs to know where they're going to put their people, and they want to make sure that it's peaceful and that you're not going to end up. And now sometimes they take on a life of their own, and they go a certain direction.
Right.
But they usually typically know where they're going. And there had been meetings. So he knew the route. He knew where they were going to be. He knew where to position himself. And so those are questions. Did the shooter attend those meetings? Did he know? Was there someone on the inside? Those are still questions that they want answered. Or did he just guess that's the way they were going to go? I mean, those are still questions that are open.
Okay. No, and then as far as, obviously Chief Brown read it wasn't really a statement. He was reading, I guess, quotes from the shooter. And do you know anything about his interaction police had with him once?
Well, the thing is that they didn't. They were trying to get to him. That's the thing. He was holed up, and he's screaming this at them.
Okay, right. Okay.
So they're screaming it at him as he's trying to negotiate. So that was what was going on there.
Okay.
So he's saying these things. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill more officers. And whatever he was that he said. Look, I've had sources that tell me that they've heard the same thing. So yes, he's the one that's making these threats.
Okay.
And so that's what Chief Brown was saying. So they knew that they were not going to be able to go in there and send the SWAT team in to get him out, because where he is, he's armed and he's dangerous and he's already threatening to kill more people. And they felt the only way to end this without more loss of life to civilians, because of where he was perched, he could have started, shooting or to more loss of life of officers. They had.
And like that, she was gone. Unfortunately, we lost connection with Rebecca and were unable to reestablish. So we did not get to finish that interview, but hopefully you got enough out of our brief conversation with her about her perspective being on the ground shortly thereafter the shootings and having known some of the officers who lost their lives, and gave some perspective on Dallas and where it was. That conversation was recorded on Saturday mid-morning, so just a couple of days after the shooting, or about a day and a half. And then now we'll get into the second part of our show, which is an interview with Lieutenant Thomas Glover. He's the current president of the Black Police Association of Greater Dallas. We're going to speak with him about several issues, including the shootings of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Philando Castille in St. Paul. We'll touch on many issues, his perspective, insight, being a Black police officer for over 3 decades. And I feel like we get into some topics that are very relevant to everything that's happened here. So I hope you enjoy the show, and I'll talk to you afterwards. Our guest today on the Vocal Minority Report is the current president of the Black Police Association of Greater Dallas, Lieutenant Thomas Glover. How are you doing today, Mr. Glover?
I am good, sir. How about you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Like I said, thanks so much for your time. I'm sure you're always busy, but I can imagine that that's been heightened here since the tragic events of Thursday evening and everything that's happened since then.
Yes, definitely.
So to get started, can you tell us a little bit about you and your career and history?
Well, I've been with the Dallas PD for over 35 years. I have been the president of the Black Police Association this time since January 7th. Prior to this, I served 3 consecutive terms from the late 90s up until the first part of the 2000s. I stepped away, was gone for about 12 years, and then I ran again last year, and I'm elected back in office. So, my career is extensive. I've been involved in a lot of the social causes here in Dallas, from racial profiling down to the promotional process, and included African Americans in specialized units as well as in the upper ranks. Our association, I should say, has spearheaded that.
And then what is the mission of your association, what the mission of the police association is, and what you all do specifically for Black officers in the community?
Well, in a nutshell, in a short sentence, our sole and most important responsibility is to bridge the gap between the police and the community. And we've done so a lot of ways. I'll give you a brief example. We spearheaded the inclusion of Blacks into specialized units in the police department. We filed legal action against the police department to change the promotional process so there wouldn't be disparity toward African American members when racial profiling was an issue and still is an issue. We were very instrumental in going to Austin, lobbying our lawmakers and participating in actions that led to racial profiling laws being passed in the city of Dallas as well as the state of Texas. We have been ardent supporters of deadly force policies, not only in the city of Dallas, but all over the state and all over the country, being reviewed and being made to be, I guess you would say, fair and inclusive and consistent with what current practices are when issues in the police department surface regarding police brutality or inappropriate use of excessive force. We were at the forefront of that, and we played a vital role and probably one of our most important roles in reporting and weeding out officers who were identified through their behavior, through their performance, or about citizens' complaints to be bad officers. So, again, in a nutshell, I repeat, bridge the gap between police and the community, our sole and most important responsibility, and we do it in a number of ways.
Okay, no, I understand. I appreciate you explaining that for our audience. So another question I would have for you, as far as being a Black police officer specifically, and obviously being involved with the association, but what kind of, or do you feel any added pressure, either personally or generally, as a Black police officer? Do you think that adds, or what does that add, to the position, your career, when policing, or is it a factor?
People would be dishonest if they told you it wasn't so. It is discussed among Black officers all the time. It is probably one of the most difficult jobs that you can do as an African American, and not because it's a bad job, but because of the expectations. On the one hand, as a police officer, your duty is to arrest violators, keep the citizens safe, preserve the peace, and prevent crime, period. And there are many people, and I say they're becoming less and less populated in our profession, who think that in order to become an effective police officer, that you have to give up your culture, do away with whatever you were surrounded with growing up and becoming an adult, and you expect it to become a part of what people call the police culture. Some people label it as the blue code of silence, or you go along to get along. He deserved to turn your head type behavior. But then on the other hand, your community looks at you as their representative to the police department, and you are expected to, for lack of better terms, be a saving grace. So when people allow it, it can be a very difficult position to be in. But we tell people, and it has been my motto forever, is that when there's something wrong, I'm going to do the right thing by making sure that whether the perpetrator was black, white, Hispanic, Asian, male or female, we will do what is necessary to bring them to justice. And I always tell people that regardless of your color, you recognize what excellence is, and we have to have excellence in policing, which stems from fairness, equitable treatment, not profiling people, and making sure that you do what is necessary to make your community safer. But you make your community safer by not allowing bad police officers, not allowing bad policing, policies that negatively impact your community. Speak up about them. And I think most people would probably agree, I'll speculate that they'll agree that black people in the black community as a whole do not dislike police officers. That's a myth that we have to put to the side. The biggest complaint that I've seen in my 35 years, and some research supports it, regarding blacks and policing, is that they want to see more of us. They only see us in the community when we are taking enforcement action, when we're making arrests, running a warrant, kicking a door in. They want us to be there to, help in the little league coaching, to, come in and spend money and to do other things. And for some, people, that is probably the biggest problem that they face. We're not anti-police as a community, as a black police association, and me as a black man and as a black police officer. We're not anti-police. We're pro-police, but we are anti-police brutality, anti-police misconduct, anti-police misuse of force, anti-police misuse of deadly force. But we support the police, the good ones, and we should. And those that are bad and that are breaking the law and mistreating people and creating distrust, then we should weed them out and not only fire them from the profession and never allow them to get a job anymore in law enforcement, but if they did anything that's criminally wrong, I think we should follow up on that.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. That's what we would expect you to, say, because that's both well, it's a lot of things. It's reasonable. It's human. It's right. It makes sense. It's kind of what we all feel, say no anti-police. It's just that, be there all the time, enriching the community as well as, policing the community. I appreciate you explaining it that way. So I'm curious, as when policing in a city that is let me rephrase that, not predominantly black, but when you're in neighborhoods in certain areas of Dallas, and you have that, when you're policing, our people, for lack of a better term, is there a certain level of pressure there? Maybe pressure is not the right word, but obviously, are you additionally conscious of those scenes, or in your mind is policing, and an offender or whomever you're dealing with, is it the same, or does that make sense? Does that vary from neighborhood to neighborhood, or depending on who you're dealing with?
A socially conscious police officer, one who is doing the right thing, and one that you or all your listeners and followers would want to be around, is a person who polices south of I-30 in the same manner that he or she police is north of I-30.
Okay.
We know it doesn't. We know it doesn't happen like that. We know it, and I would be belittling the intelligence of you and your listeners if I said that was the case. It happens where people would go to a certain portion of the city and police in a manner whereby, okay, it fits the economic status of the people that I'm policing. In lower socioeconomic areas where there is large amounts of unemployment, a lot of urban blight, there are areas where people are unemployed, hanging out on the corner and stuff. I would be utterly stupid to say that they get the same policing techniques that people who live in $1 million homes, and anybody who told you that, you should discredit them.
Right, right.
And even in this great department that I work for, and I say that not out of being sarcastic or anything, but I was here in the 1980s. I've been here over 35 years when we were one of the top departments in the nation for using deadly force against people of color. I was here when we had to call a congressional hearing in when some of our local black leaders were protesting and marching at 3-4 different locations in the city of Dallas at the police substations for a period of a year and a half. So I have seen tremendous change. I have seen tremendous efforts in community policing. That's the first step. We have to continuously dialogue with our people. We have to listen to those people in those areas that I'm talking about, the southern sector. We have to make sure that they are heard, and people who miss police in those areas have to be dealt with. You see it a lot. And so I will tell you, there is no added pressure for me or for anybody who's the right police officer to police in those matters, because the evidence will show that it's best to do it that way. On the other hand, the 1% of police officers in America or anywhere else in our department here in Dallas in the state that police them properly, they are the ones who are going to have some serious issues with fairness and equity. And I think we need to identify those people and point them out and eliminate them. So, two answers to your question, if I may do so, yes, areas of the town or city you live in based on economics might see a difference in the way policing is handled. Whether or not it's a struggle for me or for the members of my association, which are predominantly black, I don't believe it is.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that black officers don't mistreat other blacks, because I'm reminded of that great scene from Boys in the Hood where
Yep.
a black police officer went overboard in the scene where he was mistreating Mr. Gooding Jr.
Right. Yes. No. Yeah. I know exactly the scene. Yeah. The dark skinned bro. Yeah. It's because it's the same one that went to the house when the daddy shot at the burglar, the same cop. So yeah. No. It's in the movie. So yeah. No, I know that scene. So yeah, for sure, definitely.
Yeah.
And it was almost like he was showing out for the white cop. I think a lot of black people were like that attitude of why you doing all this extra? Is it because you have this white partner? Anyway, so that scene resonates with me, so I know exactly what you're referring to for sure.
Yes.
Oh, I want to get into your thoughts on Thursday night, but since we're talking about this and talking about the racial component specifically, I want to ask you about even that scene where and obviously Dallas has a black police chief now. The whole world knows that. I know that, but I feel like the whole world knows that now, Chief Brown. But with having a black police chief, and then obviously you have your command staff underneath him, do you see how has it changed, or has it changed any in your 35 years having a black police chief versus having a non-black police chief, and obviously the structure in the command? Do you see any difference there as far as tactically and strategically versus now? I know Chief Brown is very into community engagement. I can see that living here, but how has that changed? And does having a black chief specifically change anything for black officers and officers of colors day to day?
Yeah. I think it was vitally important for not only Dallas, but all the cities around America to be inclusive and to allow blacks to ascend to positions of authority within police departments. There are times when we talk among ourselves as black officers and we say that it makes a difference and we're glad it happened. There are other times when we say people are resentful of it, and they may resort to measures that would test a person. I can truly say that one of Chief Brown's strong points is community policing, and we're going to support him in times like this. It's very tragic what happened for 5 officers, 4 from Dallas and 1 from the transit police, and 7 other officers as well as 2 citizens to be targeted by a deranged, demented person. So the answer to your question is we welcome it, we applaud it, we push for it, and we believe that it's necessary in many instances to allow blacks to ascend. What we have an issue at is that people of color ascend to positions of authority in a police department and they fail to make any reforms or to do what is necessary to policies, particularly use of force and deadly force policies that will make it better for people like you and me. So that has not been the case in Dallas. Fortunately, we've had more African American leadership in police departments. Chief Brown is the second black chief we've had, and I can say we do support the policies in the police department that made it better for people to come in and complain against an officer for improper use of force, for police misconduct, and for violating the rights of a person, whether or not they be a suspect or just an innocent bystander. So I am going to definitely say that we firmly agree and support capable and qualified African Americans who are experts in the area, who serve their time and who've earned it to move up into positions of authority in police departments. And right now, with what our department is going through, we support Chief Brown wholeheartedly, 110%. He did what was necessary in order to save and preserve lives on Thursday night, not only lives of police officers, but lives of our citizens. And had that person escaped or been able to get some shots off in a direction, again, where other people were, we could have had a lot more people dead. So we do not have any issues with trying to protect the public.
So I've heard some, and a little bit of criticism of Chief Brown, and you're always going to hear that, obviously, with anything. I'm sure as a police officer, you know that probably more than any profession. But specifically, criticism over Chief Brown and the tactics used regarding taking out the shooter with the robot. And I'm not so much worried about that because I don't specifically have an issue with that. So, go get them by any means necessary, go take them out so no one else gets hurt. I'm completely fine with that. But my larger question would be, though, is regarding the paramilitary movement of many police agencies over, I would say, maybe the last 20 years. And you can speak better to that, obviously, having a longer career. Your career is as long as I've been on this earth. So you can speak better to that. But do you see, because with the whole paramilitary issue, you have tanks on the street sometimes, and the tactical gear, and even the equipment that is used to stop certain situations. So in that regard, do you have an opinion on that, how the policing can sometimes mirror or take on the effect of militarization, which can cause ire in communities?
Yes, I fully understand the feelings of our community. I'm a part of it. It brings back a very troubling time in our history. It's remindful of what went on in the late 50s and 60s when many of our cities were plagued with riots and racial unrest, and we had to bring in the National Guard, and you saw the dogs and the water cannons, and you saw the hoses that were used to, harm people, and we saw the tanks and cannons and things like that. And so I fully understand that I would probably get a lot of resistance from saying this, but at certain times, particularly in the age of public safety, the way we are now, I'll just say it without justifying it, that we need to have capable weapons to stop any threat that exists against the loss of life. And the fact that a robot was used, it was armed with an explosive, it was something that was done, and some people agree and some disagree. It's a military tactic, but so are some of the weapons that we use in order to protect us now. The semi-automatic weapons for the last 25 to 30 years have been the norm for most police officers. When I started, it was a 6-shot revolver. So we went to a militarized weapon in order to be better capable of arming ourselves against threats to public safety. But again, I believe it marks a dark day in our history, particularly for people who grew up during the civil rights movement. When we saw a military tank being driven by a National Guard, it meant that something was happening, and usually it was in our community, it was bad for our community. And so these tanks represent what many people call a symbol of oppression, whereby people would come in and just be made to do whatever was necessary by any means necessary. So I'll end it by saying, at some point in time, we have to have a weapon capable of preserving our lives. And I won't give my personal opinion on it, since I represent Black police officers in the greater Dallas area, but I'll tell you that it was a tough call. Chief Brown made a decision that probably would have been second guessed any way he did it. If he had not allowed this process to go on and approve of the method of taking his person out, and some more people were shot and killed, we would have been complaining and crucifying him for, why did you do something earlier? So it was what we call a catch-22 situation. He did what was necessary to preserve life. The guy, from all reports, was still shooting at the police. Even while they were negotiating, trying to talk him down, he was still shooting, laughing, bragging about how many did I get, saying he was going to get boarded. He had bombs all over the city. And so that person is not somebody who is safe for the citizens of Dallas. And you have to do what is necessary to end that force, to end that threat. And you evaluate it, you determine what's the best method, whether it be putting a scope-mounted rifle on it, robotic device, and sitting in and having the robotic device to pull the trigger and shoot him. Either way, he made his decision. He would have been under tremendous amounts of scrutiny. And conversely to that, had he not taken him out or given order to take him out, and the guy killed more people, the same thing would have happened. We saw that recently in Orlando. They went in and saved some people, and they're still the largest tragedy in our country in terms of loss of life on one incident with a weapon. But there were people after that who were saying that the police waited too long to come in, and there are other people who praise them. So either way you go in this profession, you're going to be second guess, Monday morning quarterback. But if it saves lives and presents an opportunity for other people to walk away unharmed, then it's and I use this word guardedly because it is dangerous to say it, but sometimes it's necessary, a necessary evil.
No, I agree. I agree, and I think anybody who, in this specific instance, talking about this shooter, this murderer, this killer, this deranged person, you would have to take him out no matter what, by any, like we said, by any means necessary. But I guess that gets to another now. I guess flipping that to the whole reason why the protest was even started, and why folks were down there, and what happened, the peaceful protest and what it erupted to, that gets into the larger conversation of, like we talked about, that 1%, the officer involved shootings, and what's happened with, I could run off, all these names here, that, recently, that, even in the last, 7-10 days, there's always, there's somebody going on, something happening. And even with on a smaller scale, with the McKinney pool party, at the pool and everything like that. So I guess my question is, with that, when that happens and you hear of an officer involved shooting or incident, what is your initial, I guess, kind of gut reaction, first as an officer, and then as a black man, or as a black police officer? Obviously you're always a black man, and you've been a police officer for the last 35 years, and But what's your reaction when you see all these stories? And again, what prompted the whole need for the protests? But as a police officer, how do those affect you?
Well, first of all, I want to say there's a tremendous concern. There's sympathy and empathy for officers who lost their lives in the line of duty on Thursday night, and there's sympathy and empathy for the two gentlemen who lost their lives at the hands of police officers. It's a very difficult and tough thing to view and look at both videos. The first one down in Baton Rouge, when I looked at
Alton Sterling, right? Yes.
It touched me. I shed a few tears, but then a few hours later when I see Mr. Castille in Minnesota, I did like most of my colleagues and black colleagues. I cried. I actually shed real tears. I mean, it was a boo in tears because it's so graphic and so pungent and right in your face. And then that night when I saw what happened in Dallas, my tears became more voluminous. I cried and I cried and I yelled and I screamed because of those 5 officers that died. I knew 3 of them personally, and one of them was a subordinate of mine up until May of 2014.
Oh, wow.
So that's a real thing. On the other hand, I'll contrast it with what happened up in McKinney, Texas. I was upset. I was alarmed. I talked to people in my church. I talked to people in the law enforcement community. And to a man, between me and you, there were people who told me that had I been present, I would have stopped that officer from mistreating the young African-American female.
Okay.
So we know all the studies in this country indicate that whether people believe it or not, that the use of force, pushing, slamming to the ground or getting on the knees or pulling a weapon is a higher possibility and probability if you're an African American. The studies show that while I'm talking to you, I had just reviewed some of that from the U.S. Census Bureau and from the FBI national statistics. So it's concrete evidence that it does happen. And so as a police officer and a police officer who represents hundreds of officers, and our association is called Black Police Association, but we are diverse. We have black officers, we have white, we have Hispanic, we got Asian officers. So we are all in this together, and we're concerned that one simple officer who goes out and creates a mistake or does something that's improper, that person does impact the police profession at a rate that nobody even can imagine. Those shootings that took place in Baton Rouge and in the St. Paul, Minnesota area are symptomatic of what most of us see as a much larger problem, and that's the use of force. We have to, as a country, pass laws. If the states refuse to do it, then it has to be done on a national level. We have to pass laws that when the use of force is inappropriate or is determined that the person posed no threat for loss of life or for serious injury, there has to be some type of repercussion. Certainly we want the person fired and labeled as non-eligible for hire for any other law enforcement jobs. But if there is any criminal behavior that is evident, similar to what happened with Walter Scott in South Carolina,
right,
that person should be, prosecuted to the fullest. And what I mean by criminal behavior, I mean tampering with evidence, making statements that are false, giving false reports.
And I'm sorry, and to interrupt you, but to be clear, that was the officer where he placed the taser. That's the video, right? Where
yes,
okay,
Officer Scott, he was actually trying to flee the scene, and he ran away several, yards or so. The officer shot him, and according to the news reports, some of the shots, or one of the shots, maybe even hit the Scott in the back. He fell. It was obvious that he was deceased or in serious medical distress, close to being deceased. And the evidence that was shot by an unknown bystander on his cell phone shows that Mr. Scott was laying there without any weapon or anything, and the officer took his taser and placed it right on the body or in the vicinity of the body. And most people speculated he was going to say he went for my taser, he tried to get my taser, and I shot it. And so that's the type of behavior you have to move swiftly with justice. You have to, put those people in custody of the state for a long time. And when situations warranted, we are firmly behind it. So my point was, we have to have concrete steps in place to deal with police misconduct. Not only was I saying that their careers will be in jeopardy and they lose them, but that's not enough. They also have to lose their freedom when they commit criminal acts like planting evidence, i.e., in this case, a taser.
Glad to hear you say it. Like I said, we certainly on this show, we're all about the accountability and who's policing the police. It's just a matter of, if as citizens we have to be held accountable for our actions, then, certainly the police, especially in these more than egregious instances when, had there been no camera, had there been no bystander there to film it, then what? Then that's just a dead black man who went for the white cop's taser, and that's the end of it, right? So that brings up two more things I have for you. One, your opinion on now. I've heard that DPD, Dallas Police Department, is okay with body cameras. Like the officers support that. And I've heard other organizations agencies throughout the country support those. But in the light of, the body cameras and then all of the bystanders and vigilantes and the videotaping, what is either your associations or your stance on the cameras for both officers and then just the results of what happens when citizens capture what's going on?
Although there's never been any form of polling of our association on that, I talk to dozens and dozens of our members on a daily basis, and they support the use of cameras in police work. And the Dallas Police Department now has a formal policy whereby we'll be outfitted with cameras. It's being done in phases, but I think so far we might have a third of the police department about to be outfitted with cameras, or they may have already been outfitted, but we support that use of not only the use of the camera, but there ought to be strict guidelines on what you can and can't do with it. You should be able to remove it. You should be able to tamper with it. We know that there are possibilities that it can be broken or, maybe dislodged in a struggle or a fight or whatever, but we support the use of cameras. And I'll tell you this, the majority of the people that I talk to in these informal conversations that are members of our association as well as this profession have no issue with cameras. In many instances, they can be used to exonerate you. We've had several cases that I'm familiar with here in Dallas whereby officers were accused of doing things and camera evidence disproved the allegations. So I think that the use of cameras, whether it be a body-worn camera or something that a person safely does from a distance, we don't advocate that a third party goes near or into the vicinity or the direct area while a police officer is doing his or her job, because it can be dangerous. And I'll be the first to tell you that that's not the way to do it. You need to stand back at a safe distance away from it and record it and do whatever's necessary. And I don't think most police officers would have issues with that.
Okay. Well, that's good, because that was going to be one of my questions. As citizens, what would you communicate to us to try to do that? So, okay, that's good. So, all right. Well, what is the proper procedure and or protocol when arriving at a scene with someone with a weapon? Now, what comes most notably to mind, excluding Thursday's events, would be the Love Field Airport that happened. What was that? 10 or 14 days ago. I can't recall how long ago it was, but then obviously there's so many other, I think about the gentleman with the screwdriver. I mean, and there's tons of instances and obviously all over the country, people have lost their lives. So what is the proper procedure? We always hear about timing and, Tamir Rice, it was 6 seconds. He parked the car, boom, what is protocol procedure when it comes to an officer arriving at a scene where either for sure that the person is armed? What should be going on there, or what should happen for the officer? What are they processing? How should that play itself out in a I don't know, not a perfect scenario because nothing is, nothing's perfect, but you know what I mean.
Without being condescending to you and your listeners, I would say that I will be purposely sidestepping this person because I don't want to give away tactical approaches of police officers.
Okay.
So on Thursday night that the shooter used a tactical approach called shoot move, and he ambushed those officers. But I can tell you that each individual officer and each individual case merits what that officer knew at the time he or she arrived, from positioning to location to time and distance to line of sight to availability of cover, availability of concealment. There are so many factors that go into that is very difficult to say, but excuse me, for deliberately, like I said, I'm not going to tell them because I will never ever disclose anything that would possibly get an officer harmed. So,
of course,
you would allow me, it's all done on an individual basis to determine what you have at the time, putting the facts together, locating where people are, whether they be hostile actors or potential victims or victims. So there's so many factors that go into it. But the sole purpose of an officer using deadly force is to preserve his life, his or her partner's life, the lives of innocent bystanders, third-party citizens, those type things. That's why you use deadly force. But there's a threat to life. And so that's a very broad connotation. And then in many instances, people say, well, he pulled a trigger, I pulled a gun and displayed, I thought he was going to shoot. And so that's left up to that officer when he or she arrives at the scene to assess it from a safety standpoint, to determine what type of act they have, what type of offense they have, and make a split-second decision. People talk about split second, but it could be a split microsecond decision whereby people get to review it, break it down on camera for weeks and weeks and months and look at it where it's blown up. That officer who arrives at the scene has to do it very quickly. And if I may add, I'll tell you something. There's an exercise called shoot, don't shoot. In fact, in the 80s when we were going through a lot of our turmoil in the police department trying to get reforms, we pulled in some of the most vocal activists and critics in the community and put them through the exercise called shoot, don't shoot. And the majority of the people who participated in it shot when it was not necessary, shot when the scenario indicated that their lives, the partners' lives, or officers from other agencies or areas who were, whatever the scenario depicted, were in danger. They would just shoot. And then in the end, during the critique, there was a lot of serious discussion, very serious discussion where people were trying to defend, well, I shot because of this. And that exercise wasn't designed to justify an officer using deadly force, but it was designed to show people that you did it in a play situation where your life wasn't in danger, you knew it wasn't in danger, you still shot. You did a bad shot, a bad shooting, but you still defended it. An officer has to do it within a split second, and that's not to justify, because I firmly believe that I have witnessed in my time and in the last year or two, in the last month, and in the last week, shootings that I had issues with, and most of the people that I work with. But again, it is a microsecond, not a full second, that you have to make a life and death situational decision to make.
I think we can all understand and appreciate your explanation there. Yeah, I mean, from a tactical perspective versus, and as well as just explaining the split second nature, because that's what I'm getting into as far as you just answered that. You can't say if it takes 6 seconds or should it take 1 second, and what that now. I still would think that 6 seconds is way too soon to assess the situation. However, I don't have any experience in certain situations. And then based on the example you just gave, I'm assuming that's, one of those where, you're in a situation there's pop-ups of, a banker, or pop-ups of someone with a gun, and people are making those split-second decisions. That's what I envision when you're talking about that exercise. Okay, well, no, I'm sorry.
I'm saying it's similar to that is.
Okay. Well, no, that makes sense. Because that's one thing that is kind of troubling in these situations where there's so much outrage. It's hard to afford officers levity and discretion, and I'm just being honest with you. It's hard but that's why I wanted to have you on the show, though, so we could bridge that gap. And I think you mentioned that too earlier, between what citizens may feel and what actually an officer both internalizes and is dealing with. And how is your, actually, let's talk about force, because so I hear and read stories about, let's talk about Britain, right? Where, and I'll paraphrase, I'll probably get some of this wrong, but where I believe most of their officers aren't armed with lethal weapons. I mean, they have tasers, and they may have a baton. I can't recall everything they have, but they don't have lethal weapons. They don't have, you have to, in order for force to be used in a lethal regard, there has to be a level of authority that comes into play before someone can use lethal force, is my understanding. So when we talk about force and we talk about alternatives, do you think that the fact that police are so armed as they are, or are armed in general, depending on the situation, does that add to or heighten? Do you think that do you give any credence to the idea that if there were less guns on both sides, both in public and with officers, that could help contribute or to the loss of lives, especially of Black people, people of color, unarmed folks? What's your opinion there?
Well, from the standpoint of deadly force, actually retrieving a weapon, pointing it, pulling it in Dallas as well as around the country, you have almost over 1 million or so contacts a year between police and citizens. Hundreds of thousands of times those officers encounter people, and maybe thousands of times a weapon is pulled. As a potential threat exists, you pull it to be aware, to be ready. And there are very few times where officers actually pull the trigger. So I'll say this, that is a very important part of the social argument of gun control going on today. Most members of my association, as well as most police officers, believe that the less guns we have on the street, the less opportunity to, engage in deadly force with the suspect. But on the other hand, speaking of the London Barbies, they do not carry weapons, but there are specialized units within the Metropolitan Police in those areas that carry weapons. Historically, since the invent of policing in this country as well as in London, it's been like that they haven't carried weapons. Our city, our state, and our country allows much more liberal laws in terms of arming yourself as a citizen with a weapon. They're easily obtained legally and they're easily obtained illegally. And so I do believe that police officers in the city of Dallas, the state of Texas, as well as this country, should be armed. They are trained on how to use the weapons. They are people who are only supposed to use them to preserve the life of the citizen, of their own lives, the lives of the partners. So in the entire gun debate scenario, our association is not anti-arming police. We don't think, certainly they haven't expressed that to me as a leader, that we should remove guns from the hands of police officers. I think
well, right.
With training, with psychological testing, with assurances that people aren't bringing biases and prejudicial behavior to work, along with a lot of other things, we need to make reforms in those areas. But from a thing I can definitely tell you that we do not advocate, that people out here carrying weapons illegally. And so the bottom line is we are not anti-gun for police officers. We support the right of police officers and the fact that they carry weapons, and I would not do a good job of answering the question as to why the police officers in London don't take a chance on doing it, but it's been that way through socialization and hundreds of years of it. So I don't know. I got some friends who work in London. Maybe I'll talk to them and ask them why.
Right. Well, yeah, no, I appreciate that. I didn't expect you to be the expert on London, whether or not they carry weapons, but you obviously you're a very well versed person who knew what I was talking about, obviously, and could speak on it. So I appreciate you speaking on it, and I certainly, I don't know how I don't come down, I guess, on either side. I mean, I do feel, because we're only having this conversation because of the overuse of force by a select number of officers. If that wasn't happening, over the however many years, and then obviously here in the last, let's say 2 years post Ferguson specifically, then we wouldn't, I wouldn't even bring it up. So your opinion on gun control when it comes to citizens. So we talk about, the Mark Hughes, one of those Hughes brothers that had his long rifle on him, which obviously is legal to carry, and we have all the open carry debates. But as a police officer, knowing the laws very well, when it comes to open carry and, the Second Amendment rights and gun control in general, what is you all stance there for as far as citizens and again, talking about the gentleman that was misidentified on Thursday specifically too?
First off, for obvious reasons, I don't know many police groups in this country, certainly in the state of Texas and here in Dallas, that supported the open carry law. We were not somebody who said, they should be allowed to carry weapons. That's not something that police officers support. And when the law was passed in the state of Texas, it went into effect. Unequivocally, I can tell you that we were against it and other groups were against it also. It's not a very popular tenet. The big problem is that you can't tell who the bad guy is and who the good person is. And you imagine yourself out at a restaurant having dinner and 4 or 5 people walked in armed with weapons. If you're not alarmed, then you're not human.
Right.
And I've been in that situation before. So as a police association and as a group that represents African American officers, coupled with what I know from other associations around the country, we were not in support of open carry law because it's very confusing. It's considered to be distasteful to people who say they are pro-gun owners and Second Amendment fanatics. But again, we're not somebody as a police association that wholeheartedly believes that, because you haven't had a felony or this Class A misdemeanor conviction that you can be armed with a weapon. The background checks, possibility of mental illness that hasn't been addressed, the use of alcohol and substance abuse, all of those play against any good law enforcement officer doing his or her job, supporting wholeheartedly that people ought to deserve to be able to get a weapon and can do it and carry it openly. So no, we're not in support of that as an association.
Okay, and that extends obviously from any type of gun, be it long rifle or be it as far as long rifles versus handguns. That's across the board, no matter what type of firearm.
Yes, and I'll answer that by saying if you saw someone walking down the street with a rifle over their shoulder, just in a ready fire position, or just carrying it, I think you'd be alarmed because number one, when I see a weapon as a trained police officer, my first thought is, where can I take cover, or what's he or she going to do with the weapon, or is it loaded, or what's the purpose? So, as a society, we shouldn't have to deal with that. It's not necessary for us to go back to the old West,
right,
1800s, and I think our founding fathers did not have that intention when they produced the Second Amendment, but it has been broadly interpreted to say that I can carry a weapon anywhere I want to. I carry a gun, and for obvious reasons, we believe that people who have no good intentions, who aren't law-abiding citizens, should be able to go out and get a weapon.
Well, yeah, and I think these last 2 cases, and probably most of the cases, have shown that, as you mentioned, background checks and FBI. I mean, that didn't Orlando, he was on the watch list. It still went down, or at one point, this Michael Johnson here in Dallas, he was able to obtain firearms, and there was something still very wrong with these people. So, all right. And then, last thing I have for you, what would be your overall message as a lieutenant, as an association, as a person of color, Black man, to citizens in the height of what we're going through as a city? Our audience is international here, but, there's everywhere. Like, what would be your message as far as how to interact with the police, how we should internalize our experiences and be able to move forward, post, I guess it seems like there's something coming up at every couple of days now, but, post all these tragedies, be it an unarmed Black person, a Black person who is armed, but many would argue that the weapon that they may have had is not, the level of force used is not, commensurate with what the weapon they had. What would be your parting thought for citizens and for folks to kind of understand where you're coming from, you all coming from? And
as an association of African American officers, predominantly African American officers, and as a 35-year veteran in law and middle-aged man, I say that the most important thing to us is the preservation of life and the prevention of any behavior that threatens that. With that being said, we have to be supportive. We have to be supportive of the police. We don't advocate or condone violence. Hate the fact that this incident took place in Dallas as well as in Minnesota and Louisiana. We are strictly against police misconduct. We are against the misuse of force by police. But if I may parallel that without being conversely misunderstood, we are pro-police and that we should support the police in their day-to-day activities. It's wrong to use force against not only police officers, but people in general in society. Murder is never condoned. It's not all right to commit murder regardless of how you feel. I believe that even the peaceful protesters, people who are a part of the social movements, we need to come to the table. And I know people are going to say, well, we've been dialoguing for so long, let's get some actions. That's correct. We need to vilify and denigrate those people who make it unpopular to complain on a police officer. We need to vote those people out of office who fail to pass laws that protect us, not only us, but other races also. We should do everything within our powers to encourage the socialization of young people that are Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or whatever to become police officers. We should identify, isolate, and eliminate any person in law enforcement who's a sore thumb or who's a problem. And one of the most important things I think we need to do, and I hope that our community and the Black community follows this, we have to make the policing profession something that is attractive to our young African American men and women. We need more people of color doing the job. And you saw how the problem was identified in Ferguson, Missouri 2 years ago, when you got a city that is predominantly Black, a city that has Black leadership in some instances, and the police force was non-representative of the community. Those are points that we think, ought to be made. And last but not least, you have to do something about the misuse of force or police misconduct, whether it takes police review boards all around this country, whether it takes federal oversight. I made a statement twice in the past week, and one of them said that we were able to do away with slavery, but it took all of us working together. We were able to do away with lynching. There was a problem at times when the same type of discussion was going on about lynching. And so we have to do away with this type of behavior. The only way to do away with it is to identify it, isolate what it is, and get rid of those people, eliminate those people who participate in it, whether it means, taking their jobs as part of it, or in cases where they exhibit criminal behavior by falsifying reports or tampering with evidence, lock them up in jail and throw away the key.
All right, that was this week's episode, another episode this week, touching on the Dallas shooting and also touching on the unfortunate murders of Philando Castille, Alton Sterling. We know there's many more out there, and we'll have subsequent shows touching on these issues, Black Lives Matter, policing, and everything in between. Please follow us on Twitter @Vocal Report. Like us on Facebook, facebook.com/The Vocal Minority Report. Can't stress enough to go to iTunes, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend, tell everyone. Try to help spread this movement. Be safe out there in the streets, and we'll holler at you next week. Peace.